Okay, when you hear the word cyborg, what actually comes to mind? Is it, the classic gleaming metal arm, maybe a glowing red eye from some sci-fi movie? Well, maybe prepare to challenge that picture a little bit.
Right.
Because we might already be living in a kind of cyborg future, not necessarily with those obvious flashy augmentations, but through something much, much more subtle, something deeply woven into our everyday lives. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how humanity's, well, ever-growing connection with technology is actively reshaping our bodies, our minds, and honestly, our entire future. Our sources make a pretty bold claim, actually. They assert, we are soft cyborgs now, and the next decade could make that transformation irreversible. That's quite a statement.
It really is a powerful one.
Yeah. So our mission today is to unpack these sources. We want to understand, how did we get here? Where exactly are we heading? And just how close are we really to that idea of full human-machine integration? We're going to guide you through some, frankly, surprising facts and maybe even more surprising implications. So let's start right there. How is your phone, the device probably in your pocket or hand right now, how is it really an extension of yourself? Because that's our first point, this provocative idea that our mobile phones are essentially our first universally adopted cyborg implant.
It's a compelling way to frame it, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Your phone, it's likely within arm's reach almost constantly. It's become your calendar, yeah, but also your camera, your map, your connection to your social life, and maybe most importantly, it acts like your brain's backup memory. The smartphone, it's undeniably shifted from just being a tool to something that genuinely feels like, well, an extension of us.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling when you leave it behind.
Exactly. Consider that. And when you lose your phone or even just forget it for a day, it's rarely just a small hassle, is it? For many people, it genuinely feels like losing a part of your mind, like you're suddenly cut off, isolated, or just less capable. You can't navigate easily, can't connect, can't recall information instantly. That feeling isn't just habit. It points to a really profound kind of neural dependency. The phone is filling cognitive roles that were once exclusively handled by our own brain.
I totally get that. I remember leaving my phone at home once, just for a day, and it was almost comical. I felt adrift. I kept reaching for it, for directions I actually knew deep down, or to look up something I probably could have remembered eventually. It really hits home, that neural dependency you mentioned. It feels like we've outsourced a chunk of our, our working memory, our consciousness almost.
Precisely. And what started as maybe a luxury, a convenience, has absolutely become a lifeline. It's critical infrastructure now. Think about it. Job interviews often require apps. Banking is predominantly mobile. Our safety relies on GPS and easy emergency calls. It's non-negotiable for modern life, as one of the sources puts it quite well. The smartphone is now a prosthetic for cognition, memory, and emotion, and we protect it as if it were part of our body.
Wow, prosthetic for cognition. That's powerful.
It is. And in that sense, it truly is the first universally adopted cyborg interface. And you could argue it's paving the way, maybe psychologically preparing us for what comes next.
Okay, so if our phones are already acting like these external brains, this soft cyborgism, what about the integration that's already happening inside our bodies? Because this is where it gets, I think, really interesting when we look at actual medical technology.
Yeah, and it's important here to maybe broaden our definition of cyborg. We're talking about any being whose abilities are augmented or extended by technology. It doesn't have to be a robotic arm or something out of fiction. It can be a device that helps your body perform a function it can no longer manage on its own. And millions of people, they already fit this description.
Right. So what are some concrete examples?
Well, think about pacemakers. Absolutely essential devices, keeping hearts beating correctly with regulated electrical pulses. Millions rely on them. Or cochlear implants. These restore hearing by translating sound waves directly into neural signals the brain can understand. It's incredible tech. Then you've got insulin pumps, even artificial pancreas systems now, providing real-time glucose control for people with diabetes. Life-changing stuff. And deep brain stimulators, or DDS, they're used for conditions like Parkinson's, severe depression, epilepsy, sending electrical impulses deep into the brain. There are even things like electrified heart meshes being developed, described as robotic cardiac supports, basically helping the heart muscle pump blood.
So these aren't just fringe experiments. These are mainstream medical tools.
Absolutely. They're standard treatments in many cases, and they are fundamentally turning humans into functional biological machine hybrids.
And the source makes such a crucial point here that we don't notice this transformation because it happens for survival, but it's cyborgism all the same. It's not just about adding abilities, it's about using tech to restore or replace a biological function. That's the key insight, isn't it?
Exactly. It reframes the whole
It
conversation.
really does. It makes you stop and think just how augmented are many of us already without even using the term cyborg.
Right. And that brings us to the next leap, which goes beyond just physical health restoration and moves towards direct neural integration. Merging our brains with machines, we're talking about brain-computer interfaces, BCIs.
Okay, BCIs, what exactly are they doing?
So essentially, these are devices that can read and interpret brain signals, our neural activity, and they translate that activity, allowing pure thought to directly control external things, machines, software, maybe even other biological systems down the line.
And the big example everyone's heard about recently is Neuralink, right?
Yes, Neuralink is definitely the most high profile right now, Elon Musk's company.
Hmm?
They successfully implanted their first chip to a human subject in early 2024. And as reported, that person was able to control a computer cursor just by thinking.
Just by thinking. That's incredible.
It is, and their long-term vision, as the sources detail, is even more ambitious. They're aiming for two-way brain data flow. Imagine not just controlling devices with thought, but potentially sending and receiving digital information directly with your brain, enhancing learning, memory, communication in ways we can barely conceive of now.
That sounds unbelievably powerful, but I have to admit also kind of terrifying. The vulnerability aspect.
That's a huge question, a critical one, and we absolutely need to get into those ethical dimensions. It's central to this whole discussion.
Okay.
But it's also important to note, Neuralink isn't the only player here, not by a long shot. There are other significant BCI efforts. Synchron, for example, is developing a less invasive approach. Their device is inserted via blood vessels, avoiding open brain surgery. They're already in clinical trials.
Less invasive sounds appealing.
Definitely. And then you have organizations like DARPA, the U.S. military's research agency. They're funding programs like N3, looking into silent command BCIs for military applications. That shows you the strategic importance being placed on this. And even companies like OpenBCI, they're working with gaming companies like Valve, exploring how BCIs could power virtual reality experiences. That could be a pathway to mass adoption through entertainment.
So it's coming from multiple angles: medical, military, consumer tech.
Precisely. And the timeline is accelerating. A significant review article in Nature Reviews Neurology from 2023 actually forecasted that BCIs could become genuinely viable for clinical and even commercial use within the next 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. For things like stroke recovery, better prosthetic control, maybe even cognitive enhancement.
That's the projection. Yes, it's moving fast.
Wow. The pace is just... It's breathtaking. It's not just that these things are possible. It's the speed and the way different fields are converging. So if that's the next 5 to 10 years, what about the decade after that?
Yeah.
What does this really mean for our daily lives as we head towards, say, 2035?
Well, based on the research and expert forecasts cited in our sources, we can sketch out a potential timeline of milestones. It's speculative, of course, but based on current trajectories, as early as next year, 2025, we might see the first commercial rollout of emotion-aware wearable AI, devices that sense and perhaps respond to your emotional state.
Emotion-aware AI, okay.
By 2026, maybe the first consumer-grade BCIs for very basic control functions. Think simple commands. 2027 could bring smart neural implants designed for things like chronic pain management or perhaps even aiding memory recovery after injury. By 2028, we might see limited use of thought-to-text tools, primarily helping users with severe disabilities to communicate by thinking.
That would be incredible for accessibility.
Absolutely. Then looking further out, by 2030, the prediction includes full-function brain-computer neuroassistants. Imagine an AI co-pilot integrated with your thought processes.
An AI co-pilot in your head.
Essentially, yes. By 2033, maybe cognitive upgrades becoming available, likely first in elite professional settings, think surgeons, pilots, analysts. And perhaps the most striking prediction, by 2035, brain-linked AI assistants could potentially start replacing screens altogether as our primary interface with digital information.
Wow, replacing screens. That's hard to even picture. It sounds like science fiction, but you're saying the roadmap is actually being laid out now.
The research is happening, the investment is there. It won't happen overnight, obviously, but it is moving faster than many people probably realize.
It really is. For some, that timeline probably sounds utopian, solving so many problems. For others, I imagine deeply dystopian.
And that's the tension, isn't it? Look, our phones already blurred the line between human and machine in a way. Medical implants have deepened that connection physically. Brain-computer interfaces seem poised to potentially erase that line almost entirely. We could genuinely be looking at futures with personalized mental assistance, monitoring our stress via brain waves, maybe suggesting choices or interventions. The idea of neural-to-neural communication, basically, mind-to-mind speech, is being actively researched. And the sources even discuss digital memory backups, the possibility of recalling forgotten information like opening a file on a computer.
Accessing memories like files.
It sounds fantastical, but the point is, this future isn't just theoretical anymore. It's not only possible, elements of it are in active development right now.
Which brings us squarely back to that crucial question. With all this potential integration, it's not just can we do this, but should we? This feels like where the rubber really meets the road, doesn't it? What are the big risks, the ethical tightropes we're going to have to walk?
Absolutely. This is where it gets incredibly complex, moving beyond the purely technical into the political, the philosophical, the societal. As we integrate technology more deeply into our brains and bodies, we have to confront some profound questions. Our sources highlight several key areas. First, ownership. Who owns your thoughts if they're stored digitally or transmitted? Is it you, the company providing the tech?
That's fundamental.
Then security. Can a memory-enhancing chip be hacked? Could your thoughts or perceptions be subtly influenced or manipulated without your knowledge? The potential for misuse is significant.
Hugely significant.
And accessibility. Will these enhancements be available to everyone? Or will they create an even wider gap between the rich, who can afford cognitive upgrades, and everyone else, a kind of neurodivided society?
A biological divide almost.
Potentially. And what about neurodiversity? If there's a push towards technologically optimized thinking, could that devalue or even threaten the natural spectrum of human cognition?
These aren't small questions. These are fundamental questions about what it means to be human.
Exactly. And it's telling that some places are already trying to get ahead of this. Chile, interestingly, became the first country in the world to actually amend its constitution to include neuro rights.
Neuro rights, what does that entail?
Things like protecting mental privacy, personal identity, free will from technological manipulation, and ensuring fair access to cognitive enhancement technologies. It's pioneering stuff.
So legal frameworks are starting to grapple with this already.
Yes, and it suggests other nations will likely need to follow suit as these technologies mature. It underscores the point. The future of cyborgism isn't just a biological challenge, it's deeply political and philosophical too.
So let's just recap where we've landed. From the smartphones practically glued to our hands, acting as external brains, to the pacemakers quietly regulating heartbeats inside chests, to the AI whispering assistants in our ears, maybe sooner than we think. We really are living through the early chapters of human-machine fusion. And it didn't start with fancy brain chips.
Yep.
It arguably started the moment your phone became something you felt you couldn't really function without.
That's a great way to put it. And the core question hanging over us now as individuals and as a society is really, how deep do we want this integration to go? And crucially, at what cost? What are we willing to trade for these potential enhancements?
Yeah. The next decade, it seems clear, is going to bring just extraordinary breakthroughs, things that could genuinely transform lives for the better. But it's also going to be a massive test of our values, our ethics, our foresight, whether this evolving cyborgism ultimately empowers us or perhaps controls us. Well, that seems like it will depend entirely on the choices we make now, how we decide to shape these technologies, and maybe just as importantly, who gets access to them and who gets left behind.
Yeah.
Definitely something profound to think about as you navigate your own future in this rapidly changing world.